If Hamas continues its refusal and does not release the hostages soon, the IDF will engage in intense fighting throughout Gaza until the hostages are released and Hamas is defeated. At the same time, we are working to advance the voluntary emigration plan for Gaza residents in accordance with the U.S. president's vision.
In other news, a prominent group of Muslim scholars has issued a fatwa, or an Islamic decree, calling for jihad against Israel and urging Muslim nations to intervene in what they call a genocide against Palestinians. Egypt's Grand Mufti quickly rejected the ruling, calling it irresponsible and warning only states have the authority to declare jihad. The sharp disagreement reveals growing divisions in the Muslim world over how to respond to the war in Gaza, which reportedly has claimed tens of thousands of lives. Well, Raj Nair joins us now. He's CBN's senior digital media host. Welcome, Raj.
Raj, you've been tracking this story closely. We know. What stood out to you, Raj, most about the timing and the language in this fatwa?
So the fatwa, kind of a religious edict from the International Union of Muslim Scholars. It's egregious, it's horrific, but what really stood out to me is there's just no shame. It is, there's no hiding it. You would think something as egregious as this, there'd be a little like secret game plan, but if you go on their website, it's right there in plain English. Let me read you just a couple of lines because I think it's important. We reiterate that it is obligatory for all Muslims and Muslim nations to engage in jihad against the Zionist entity. Financial jihad is an obligation upon every capable Muslim. And here's one more. The committee reaffirms the prohibitions of all forms of normalization with the occupying Zionist entity. This is not a hidden thing. This is their game plan. They put it in English for everyone to see.
So in the story that we just mentioned, Egypt is trying to delineate between a nation or a state declaring a jihad or fatwa versus Muslim scholars. Is there any delineation in that? And what would it take for government or court to actually enforce that?
So I'm not an expert on Muslim law, but this is something coming that people have been telling me. This is a Muslim Brotherhood orchestrated event. Now, there are different organizations and countries that have straight up banned the Muslim Brotherhood. So who listens to this? Who does this apply to? I've talked to many people in the Middle East that have different opinions, but basically, who is the Muslim Brotherhood? Who does it control? Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Who does this actually impact? Will certain nations listen to it? It's up for debate because I've even talked to someone who said just because this was ruled by someone in Qatar doesn't mean that this guy was the guy who said it. If you're saying it in Qatar, then someone kind of told him to say it, allowed it to be said. So there's a lot of posturing, and exactly what this means is a subject for debate inside the Middle East.
Yeah. So Egypt's top religious authority pushed back, Raj. Why do you think that is? And what does it tell us about the split within the Muslim world over Gaza?
Well, that's what's been really interesting is if you actually talk to people on the ground in places like Egypt, in places like Jordan, even places like Gaza, people are pushing back against this radical jihadist ideology. We've seen, it's very public, obviously, at this point, that there's people in Gaza, protesting against the rule of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So the ground isn't necessarily all in favor of this. And obviously, countries like Egypt are more pragmatic. They're, trying to run a country as opposed to some of these, genocidal regimes like we have in Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon. So I think you have like this, as you were saying, like this split, like, listen, we tried it your way. Look what happened in Gaza. Tens of thousands of people are dead, as you just mentioned. And what did it get us? What has this benefited us? So you're actually starting to see, I think, a lot of fissures of, what does it mean to resist the Zionist entity and why are we even doing this in the first place? So again, when you talk to people on the ground, you will, which I almost would consider encouraging, you're starting to see a fracture of what it means to resist the Zionist entity. And this fatwa doesn't really ring true to a lot of people anymore.
Raj, real quickly, are you also seeing that from officials on social media?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to, I was talking to a friend of mine who grew up in the Middle East, and he basically said, listen, there are certain things that you just do because you're told. And so if you were, for example, releasing this fatwa in the UK or the United States, it'd be your opinion, your thoughts. there's a lot of people with strings being attached to who can say what and when you can say it. So when governments might say a certain thing, like MBS in Saudi Arabia, but do a different thing. And so I think it's a lot of jockeying and posturing. What does it actually mean at the end of the day? That's up for debate inside the Middle East.
All right, CBN senior digital media host Nair. Raj, thank you. Great to see you.